Welcome to the second and last day of the Lifelong Learning Platform Lab, the first initiative on capacity building for lifelong learning, which is today, which will be today focused on public policies and practices in Portugal. In order to give you some context and thinking that some of you might not have been able to be here yesterday, let me just go through very quickly some house rules we need you to take into account. The first one is that we would like to see your faces, unless you don't agree, because you are very pretty, I'm sure, but also because it's much more nice to speak seeing who's on the other side than to a name or a photo. But please do keep your mics off because it will interfere with the presentations. So happy to see all of you there. The second house rule is that we have interpretation available both from Portuguese to English and English to Portuguese. If you don't know how it works, you can just look below where you see the mic and the participants. You have the interpretation globe. If you click on it, you will see that you have interpretation available in these two languages, as I mentioned. We have our interpreters there. Maybe they want to say just a couple of words, just like yesterday.
Sim. Posso falar? Muito bom dia a todos. Hoje estamos aqui no segundo dia do Laboratório de Aprendizagem ao Longo da Vida. Só algumas regras para aqueles que não estiveram cá ontem. Gostávamos que todos ligassem a câmara para que possamos ver os vossos agradáveis rostos. E também para quem queira seguir a interpretação simultânea, este evento tem tradução simultânea de português para inglês e de inglês para português, e então para acederem à interpretação simultânea tem a esfera armilar, o ícone do mundo, do lado direito em baixo, que diz interpretação ou interpretation, e então aí podem escolher o vosso idioma. No caso, para escolherem português, para seguirem a interpretação em português, carregam em português e vão nos ouvir a traduzir tudo aquilo que for dito em inglês. Até já, boa conferência.
Okay, thank you. We will also have some digital tools that we will use through the morning, just like such as Mentimeter, for example. You will see that the colleagues will post on the chat some information about it, because I will immediately start using it. So do make use of it, do participate, because it's also a very nice way to make it more active instead of just being myself speaking to you, for example, at this stage. So you can go using your telephones, or your computer or laptop, whatever. You can go to menti.com and please use the code 61108796 in order to follow and actively participate in these first 10 minutes of the lab. A last but not least important advice: if you have questions or doubts, you can post it in the chat. You have the colleagues from the lifelong learning staff available. They are identified as support, LLLP support. So if you have technical questions or any other, you can just ask the questions to them directly. We already have Hamzas and I didn't ask the question. So we're having the same problem that we had yesterday with Mentimeter. No. So, oh no, people are already answering. Okay, so that means I should move ahead. So let's go ahead. So in order to give you some context for the day, it's up to me to take you through the main results or indicators we got from the feasibility study that LLLP conducted. We had one in 2012, and then we had a second one on 2017 for national lifelong learning platforms. With this survey, we were wondering about the perception of education and training stakeholders on the existing state of play for lifelong learning cooperation of education and training across sectors at national level, with a focus on awareness and involvement in lifelong learning policies by stakeholders in education and training and cross-sectoral cooperation. It helped the platform to compare the results, so the state of play across countries and potential for setting up the lifelong learning platforms, which would be at the end what we would like to have in each country, a lifelong learning platform. So such as a space, when I say a platform, I mean a space for structured cooperation in view of influencing the agenda and implementation of all the policies on lifelong learning. As you can see, we have prepared a short quiz about the second feasibility study. You have the link for the Menti survey in the chat. And the first question, as you see, is which countries were covered in the second feasibility study? I see that 18 people have answered. We will shortly wait for some more answers. So please don't hesitate to go to menti.com, use the code 61108796 and answer to the first question. And maybe we can go ahead. So the correct answer would be the middle one, the one in the middle: Hungary, Austria, Portugal, Slovakia, and Sweden. Those were the countries that completed the second feasibility study, which were not covered in the first one. So let's move to the second question. The second question is, in your opinion, people generally link the concept of lifelong learning in your country to, and please have in mind that it's not your understanding of lifelong learning, it's what you think that people generally think that lifelong learning is or linked to. So is it any kind of learning taking place through life, be it informal, formal, or non-formal? Is it non-formal and informal learning, adult education, continuing vocational education, or formal education? So what we can see is that, for example, people here think that in general, the concept of lifelong learning is directly linked to adult education. So not necessarily what it is and what we want it to be understood. We would like to stress that we have this holistic definition of lifelong learning. So usually it's very common that it's not understood the same way all over the countries. And perhaps we can now show the results of the feasibility study. As we can see, and for example, we can focus on, for example, Sweden. They have a much more broader understanding of what is lifelong learning, which is not surprising. But we can also see that in the majority of the countries, let's see, for example, Portugal, still we have 45% of people saying that the concept is that lifelong learning is understood as any kind of learning taking place throughout life, be it formal, informal, or non-formal. By the other hand, we can see that in countries like Hungary, Austria, Hungary, for example, It's also, we do have a majority, but for example, in Austria, it is mostly understood as vocational and continuing education for adults and professionals, just like the green one. And we see that in Slovakia, for example, although the green bar is also higher, we can also see that vocational and continuing education, just like you said, you mentioned before, is also the most probable answer when we ask people. I think we can go to the next slide. So the question for you now is if lifelong learning is a priority in your country. Oh, God. If you consider lifelong learning a priority in your country. What we can see is that half of the people here are not voting, so we would like to have more opinions on the topic concerning the priority issue. We have people from all around Europe. We have to take into account that the countries that we focus on the second feasibility study are not necessarily the same that are here represented today. But still we can see a majority of people saying no, that lifelong learning is not a priority. Yes, Luis, I wish I could also vote. Who knows? I'm not sure. I don't know. Yes. But yes, in the feasibility study, 65% of the people, and that includes Portugal, if you take a look, of the Nordic countries like Sweden, 87, almost 88% said yes, lifelong learning is a priority. The Portuguese people answered also yes, lifelong learning is a priority, almost 68% of the people answering. And in Austria also 81, almost 82% of the respondents, which were stakeholders, providers on lifelong learning, answered that yes, lifelong learning is a priority. The countries where this portrait is not so good looking were mostly Hungary and Slovakia. So I think we might have some clues for the discussions that we will have during the morning, having this data as a basis, but also your answers that you just gave. Okay, now the question is from 1, in which 1 is very low, and 5 means high. How do you evaluate your level of involvement in policy making and your satisfaction with it? So you have 2 votes to do, one concerning the level and another one concerning the satisfaction. Yes, we are dealing with perceptions, not necessarily with results or scientific evidence. Okay, so let's say that most of the people answering are in the average, so half of the people, or we are more or less in the middle in what concerns the level of involvement. People consider that they are relatively involved and that they are not too satisfied with their level of involvement. So we can also increase and improve this situation, of course. And another question from 1, which means very little, to 10, which means a lot. How much do you cooperate with? And we have several options: education institutions, public authorities, research organizations, social partners, civil society organizations, and companies. And while people are voting, while you are voting, I can already see that, well, and I suppose most of you are education providers or education stakeholders. If we have that into account, the cooperation is higher with other education institutions, but also relatively high amongst civil society or with civil society organizations, which is great, with social partners, less with companies, and with public authorities and research organizations. The numbers are also a bit lower. So if we take a look to the feasibility study and the answers that the Portuguese respondents gave to this, because we have a majority of Portuguese people here, we would like to give you some insights. So we seem to have a lot more cooperation than in other countries. For example, Slovakia cooperates between 33 and 67% with the education institutions, while the Portuguese respondents, we all said that we cooperate with other institutions. Also, cooperation is relatively high with social partners and research institutes. Public authorities and companies were the ones that we said that we cooperate less. So to conclude, we would like to emphasize that although the study has some limitations because it has to do with perceptions, of course, there is a general consensus that cross-sectoral cooperation would be useful, would reinforce education and lifelong learning in general. I think we all agree in that. Generating more communication and thus better results in terms of outreach, equity, which is at the end what we all want to achieve. We also advise you to take a look at the different stages recommended, for example, for establishing a national lifelong learning platform. It goes from events to groups, from groups to associations. That's what we will see in the labs today. That's why we want you to stay here. Take a look now and pay attention to the keynote speech and to the panel. But then when we move to the labs, you will see examples of how lifelong learning platforms have been established across Europe. I will now pass the floor to Professor Paula Guimarães from the Institute of Education of the University of Lisbon. She will speak to us about lifelong learning and education in Portugal, opportunities and obstacles, which is always challenging. Paula, welcome and go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to greet everybody. I will be speaking in English. I understood yesterday that it was possible to speak in Portuguese, but I prepared my presentation in English. So if it is fine, I will go on with English. I know that this is not really nice for the translators, but well, I would like to greet everyone. So it's a pleasure for me to be here. This lifelong learning platform and lab, it's a very interesting initiative. I didn't know so much about it before the invitation, except for Susana, that I know for some time now. And well, we have had the chance to work together in some occasions, and it was very good. So I'm very pleased to know her and to have worked with her before. So I was asked to say a few words and about lifelong learning, having in mind this feasibility study on national lifelong learning platforms that was presented. Some of the results were mentioned here before by Susana. It's a very interesting study. If you have the chance to read it, it's interesting because it compares results from countries that are not so similar in what concerns public policies, and also the tradition in public policies in Europe. So it's interesting to see how people from different countries react to different questions, to different possibilities. So it's really nice and interesting. So it was a good work to be achieved. So I would like to say a few words about what I called lifelong learning and education. It's, well, the expression lifelong learning is a very important one for the European Union, especially since 2000, from the memorandum in lifelong learning, the Lisbon strategy. So in the last 20 years, this has been a very important topic for the European Union. But of course, the idea is not a new one. It doesn't have 20 years, so it's something that has a longer story. If you think in terms of common sense, it's an idea that has been here forever. So everybody thinks that, I think it's a common agreement that people learn throughout their lives. So it's not something new, but of course it is new when it comes to public policies, to adopt this idea or to try to make sense of this idea in terms of public policies. And of course, it was a very important topic, especially after the Second World War, and in specific in international organizations. First, as far as we know, the Council of Europe took this idea and tried to make sense out of it. Well, in the late, in the 50s, and then it became a very important idea for UNESCO in the 70s, and in the 90s, especially for the OECD and the European Union. The European Union, from this point of view, is a very important international governmental organization because it's spread this idea, and also it found ways of making sense out of it with a large set of tools, if I may call them this way, in order for the European Union as such to work with this idea, and also to the member state to use this idea in the reform of their education and training systems. But just to add to this forward, from my knowledge, this idea is not developed in the same way in all of the member states. So some countries are more devoted, more following these lifelong learning guidelines than others. So I would like to, I prepared the presentation, and I would like to share. Who can share? Only the host. Who can start sharing when someone else is sharing? Only the host. Let's see if this works. Is it so? I would like to share my presentation.
Sim, Paula. Sim, yes, you should be able to share.
Okay, but I'm not able to share. Well, okay, now I am. Thank you. Okay, so let me see. So my presentation is called Lifelong Learning and Education Opportunities and Obstacles. And first I will refer briefly to lifelong learning opportunities and obstacles from the point of view of the European Union. This is not the only point of view when it comes to this idea of lifelong learning. Then I will say a few words about the Portuguese case that has been considered a successful case in terms of lifelong learning. And then I will stress some challenges for the future with this expression, lifelong learning and education, because I will be raising some critiques to the lifelong learning adopted from the European Union. And this is very much related to the idea that we should add education to lifelong learning as well. So a first idea is that, well, lifelong learning is something important for the European Union, especially since 2000 with the Lisbon strategy up until today. So it has been a very important effort to articulate policies, to articulate guidelines. Well, there are several different programs such as Education and Training 2020 and 2010 and 2020. There is the open method of coordination, benchmarks, indicators, frameworks. So it has these guidelines have a large set of tools that have been used both by the European Union and also by the member states to implement what was called the silent revolution by Vivian Reading some years ago. And in fact, it is something that has been reforming the education and training systems in many countries in the European Union. Not in the same way in all of them, but in many countries, and it has been very important, for instance, for Portugal, namely for the adult education policy. So it is also a tool for democratizing education and training systems, and I'm referring in specific to the right to education and the widening of access and participation to education to different social groups. And I'm referring, of course, about young people, but when it comes to adult learners, this is very clear, especially when it comes to the low skilled. So the low skilled learners are a central topic for lifelong learning in the European Union in nowadays. Another thing that I believe that is important when it comes to lifelong learning in the European Union is this idea of soft governance, all of these tools that are used to develop this idea. And of course, something that seems to me clear is this preference for a top-down approach, which is very traditional one. If I look from the point of view of adult education, from the grassroots of adult education, from the role I think that civil society organizations should have, not only in policy implementation, but also in policy planning. So there are some opportunities. I could have stressed more, but well, we don't have so much time. Well, I think lifelong learning is an opportunity as it sets economy as a central pillar. Of course, this idea has been very much criticized, but by many. Because, well, of the valuing of human capital and production of valuable knowledge for economic development and innovation. And many says, well, lifelong learning is not just this, it's more than that. But if you look at it from the point of view of Portugal, and especially of 30 years ago, lifelong adult education was very much seen as second chance education. So this thing of combining education and training was something important. It's not enough, of course, but it was a very important step. Well, lifelong learning sets people as a central pillar for the system, and this is very important. So it's not only knowledge, it's not only the curriculum, but it's also people that are important in this idea of lifelong learning. So learning here, learning from experience, learning in different contexts is a relevant idea. Of course, even if it is lifelong learning is very much related to an instrument for people to improve knowledge and skills within economy and knowledge relevant for economic development. So we could say that, well, it is important to place people in as a center of the system, but of course, this emphasis on economic development is too much. We should look at other areas, at other streams that can be developed. And of course, another opportunity is that according to lifelong learning, education and training are infrastructures and instruments for increasing access and participation. Even, of course, if the stress is very much related to economic development and unemployment management. Well, about the obstacles, I would like to refer to the following. So if we look at what has been happening with lifelong learning guidelines and tools and, well, all sorts of instruments that have been created, we can say that, and then looking at what's happening in national terms, we can say that education and training include provision that is hardly regulated in many countries. And this is a concern, especially if you look at it from the civil society side. So it's in many occasions, it's very difficult to follow all the regulations that exist. It's very much related to formal and very formalized as well education and training offers, which make it difficult for non-formal education providers to join the provision. It is funded by the EU and national authorities following a top-down approach. Of course, within partnerships, Portugal is a good example, as was said before by Susana. But of course, these funding rules existing do not leave much space for these civil society organizations to be autonomous and to do things in a different way. And of course, another obstacle is the slow increase and even decrease in some situations, especially in the last 10 years, of participation in education and training. And another thing is also this stress upon the low skilled and leaving aside all of the others that are not low skilled.
Paula, desculpa.
So,
yes. Paula, o teu tempo rapidamente se esgotou. Por isso, só pedi que tentasses resumir a ideia em mais 3, 4, 5 minutos, está bem? Não podemos mesmo passar desse tempo.
Ok. Desculpa, foi erro de gestão de tempo. Obrigada. Well, just to say a few words about Portugal. So Portugal has been seen as a relevant case in the lifelong learning, following or having a policy that follows the lifelong learning guidelines. And just to give you some ideas about the last education and training program that is called Qualifica. So there are here some keywords, some key ideas related to this program. It's not the only one, so there were 2 others before, but it is an interesting example of this articulation between education and training. And of course, there are some opportunities with this program. And this is really very much related to the acquisition of relevant knowledge. If it has a market and economic value, it is directed at upskilling the Portuguese adult learners and to others, of course, and obstacles. Well, I would say that this is very much focused on formal education and training. This idea that the higher education provision is not part of this education and training policy devoted at adults in present times, and also the providers that are very much regulated and very much related to all these rules that exist to develop provision. And of course, we still are noticing low participation levels in what concerns the participation of the adult learners. So what I would like to add just to end is that, well, apart from lifelong learning, we could also add this education idea to have a broader, a wider idea about what can be lifelong learning. So I would propose lifelong learning and education, following the guidelines from international organizations such as the Council of Europe and UNESCO. And I'm thinking about an integrated and comprehensive policy, also trying to involve these different levels of policy decision and policy development, different kinds of providers, decentralized and co-participated spaces for dialogue and decision making, and of course a more bottom-up approach that would value several kinds of knowledge, and not just the school or the school related knowledge and the professional related knowledge, but knowledge related to popular education, civic education, social and personal knowledge acquired in social learning. So emphasizing situated learning and learning experience within a social and educational commitment. And this is my last slide. I would like to stress that this wider understanding of lifelong learning, so this lifelong learning and education, would raise some questions that I don't know how to answer to them. So this is questions for discussing. The first one is the role of the state and public authorities, and also the European Union, of course, in policy planning and policy decision. And as I said before, I believe that the system right now is a very top-down approach follower. So how could we think about a different connection between the public authorities and also all the other providers involved in this system? Which actors and providers would be involved in such a policy? And we know that if we look at the non-formal stream, we have a very wide range of providers that develop very different kinds of projects, of activities. So who would be the ones involved and who would be the ones left out? What would be the policy priorities and aims of lifelong learning and education? How could the provision be in terms of aims of adult learners, of adult educators? And how could lifelong learning and education be democratically subversive and transformative? And this is a strong topic that it's important also in this feasibility study. And it was also referred yesterday as an important idea. So how could we think about a system? How could we think about an approach that it is for everybody, but also at the same time emancipatory and transformative, and not just following and aiming at adaptation of workers, of learners, of citizens to the main existing rules, that can be somehow innovative to make it different in alternative ways. And this is what I wanted to say. I'm sorry if I took much more time than was expected. This was a time management mistake. And well, and once again, thank you for having me here. It's a great pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
It was a pleasure to listen to you. I know that most of us that know your work, we appreciate the work you have been doing. I would suggest if you let your presentation available, and once we don't have time for answers, that people can write the answers either by email, the questions either by email, either by the chat to the LLLP team, and we can send it to you. And if you don't mind, we can then have a broader discussion, because I let you finish because I already knew that you would touch the sensitive points and the most important ones for us as a lifelong learning platform. So thank you very much for being with us. It was an honor, a privilege to have you here today. And I would now move ahead and directly to my colleague from the steering committee of the lifelong learning platform, Giuseppina Tucci. Hello, Pina.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Bom dia. I don't know how to say this. I have to say my Portuguese has never been on the one of my strengths. I'm very happy to welcome you all to this roundtable on the Portuguese agenda and cooperation in education and training, the role of policymakers, education stakeholders, and civil society. We have with us some very interesting speakers lined up. So we have with us João Costa, State Secretary for Education in Portugal, Manuel Miguens, Secretary General of the National Education Council in Portugal, Ivan Gonçalves, I'm sorry for my pronunciation, member of the Portuguese Parliament and former student representative, Luís Costa, representative from ANESPO, the Executive Director of the ANESPO, and former President of the Lifelong Learning Platform, Tina Sueiro, member of the board of EAEA and APCEP, and Noija Pedro from the Institute of Education of the University of Lisbon. So I hope everyone's fine with the way I mispronounced your names. So just a quick reminder on the structure of the discussion. We're gonna have some inputs from the 5 speakers. This is limited to 5 minutes. 5, not 10, 5, and I'm going to jump in when you have 1 minute left so that you can wrap up slowly. There is interpretation, so there might be some delays in for people who listen and for me to finish listening if you speak in Portuguese. We invite you all to interact with the roundtable. You can interact in the chat as we don't know how we will be doing with time management. So until then, please try the chat. I'm gonna try to start with a small exercise and finger warming exercise. So for those of you who are already here and are not in the roundtable, try typing something in the chat. Tell us where you are from so that we can see that you all know. I mean, I saw already the chat has been lively, but I would be happy to see everyone tell us where. Thank you, Luis, for starting this. Something in the chat is perfect, or you can tell us where you're from or where you're connecting from. So again, we will then have some time for interaction. Welcome again, everyone. So if there is, without further ado, I'm going to start inviting all of you to contribute. I'm going to start with João. I don't know if you have presentations, feel free to share your screen. Otherwise, welcome.
Thank you. Muito obrigado a todos, é um gosto estar aqui. Eu tinha uma apresentação, mas como estou aqui com um calendário e um horário muito apertado, achei que era mais fácil não a usar para tentar gerir bem o tempo e até eventualmente poder contribuir para compensar um bocadinho o atraso que já levamos, porque eu sou mais interessado em que se cumpra depois o horário do fim, se não tenho o resto da manhã bastante estragada. Queria cumprimentar os meus colegas de painel, dizendo que é um gosto revê-los a todos e estar aqui convosco. São 5 pessoas que salvarão o painel depois de mim pela qualidade que lhes reconheço e pelo compromisso com estas áreas. E, obviamente, agradecer a toda a equipa do LLLP o convite para me associar nesta manhã a este evento. Eu, nestes poucos minutos, queria deixar 4 ideias principais. Uma é a defesa da aprendizagem ao longo da vida, da educação de adultos, como um princípio. O que é que eu quero dizer com isto? Nós hoje já temos grandes consensos a nível global, a nível internacional, sobre a ideia de que, quando falamos de educação, estamos a falar desde o berço até ao final, ao limite das nossas capacidades para aprender quando somos adultos e quando a nossa vida está a chegar ao fim. Nem sempre há partes desse consenso que nem sempre estão suficientemente estabilizadas. Ou seja, se penso eu que não passará pela cabeça de ninguém neste momento dizer os primeiros 4 anos de escolaridade, eu agora sou sou primeiro-ministro do meu país e acho que os primeiros 4 anos de escolaridade vão ser descontinuados, progressivamente descontinuados. Isto não passa pela cabeça de ninguém, mas quando olhamos para a área da educação e formação de adultos, aqui em Portugal vivemos essa realidade. Foi pegar num programa que tínhamos, o programa Novas Oportunidades, e simplesmente desmantelá-lo, e é muito fácil destruir, é sempre mais difícil reconstruir, desmantelá-lo em cima de um preconceito que dizia, no fundo, não estudaste quando estavas na escola, estudasses, porque isto agora da educação de adultos já não é para ti. Nós, a partir de 2017, quisemos reassumir a prioridade da educação e formação de adultos e da aprendizagem ao longo da vida nas políticas públicas. Lançámos o programa Qualifica, que já aqui foi referido, um programa que nos permitiu abrir por todo o país mais cerca de 310 centros, entre escolas, centros no Instituto de Emprego e Formação Profissional, centros também em operadores privados, e isso permite-nos chegar a este momento, depois de terem dito que não valia a pena, de terem dito que até com algumas frases menos felizes, sugerindo que a educação de adultos seria para pessoas com menos capacidades. Isto permite-nos chegar agora a este momento com cerca de 500 mil de portugueses já com processos de certificação de competências e de formação concluídos, quando há meia dúzia de anos chegámos a ter anos em que as certificações não passaram dos 250 inscritos. Portanto, isto é um sinal de que quando assumimos a educação e formação de adultos como princípio, estamos a voltar a dizer que, de facto, a educação é algo de que temos o direito de beneficiar durante toda a vida. E porquê? Porque sim, não precisa de justificação, porque estimular a relação com o conhecimento é sempre aquilo que compete a qualquer Estado, também porque é uma dívida que a sociedade tem para com aqueles que não tiveram a oportunidade de estudar, ou seja, é uma dupla penalização aquilo que se faz quando não se investe em educação e formação de adultos. Estamos a pegar muitas vezes em jovens adultos ou adultos menos jovens, a quem a sociedade falhou quando eram pequenos porque não conseguiu dar a resposta para que eles concluíssem a sua escolaridade, e ao fechar a porta à educação mais tarde, estamos novamente a falhar, porque quando a pessoa queria mais tarde continuar a sua educação, nós dizemos não, só tiveste ali até aos 18 anos e agora acabou a tua possibilidade. Depois, portanto, há aqui um princípio de pagar esta dívida. Depois, como é evidente, e já foi aqui tocado, eu voltarei a isto mais tarde, porque nós estamos em momentos de transformação muito dinâmica, muito rápida, daquilo que são as necessidades de qualificação para nos ajustarmos a diferentes desafios profissionais que nos vão surgindo, e simplesmente os conceitos de upskilling, reskilling, não é justo, nem é parte da nossa função enquanto administração de um país, não disponibilizar estratégias e formas e modos para que as pessoas possam apresentar-se no mundo do trabalho de uma forma mais capaz, mais qualificada, mais atualizada. O segundo princípio diz respeito à agenda da educação profissionalizante, da formação profissional, seja para jovens, seja para adultos. Há um primeiro passo que demos aqui em Portugal e que temos vindo a dar, já vi que já não tenho tempo, mas vou concluir. Temos, achava eu que não ia usar os 5 minutos, temos vindo a fazer um caminho contra a secundarização do ensino profissional, no discurso legislativo, nas formas de acesso à universidade, na integração nas reformas curriculares, no estabelecimento de uma rede que envolve os territórios, envolve também a identificação da relevância dos cursos. E finalmente, saltando aqui um ponto então, que eu trazia sobre, no fundo, a relação entre tudo isto e a nossa agenda europeia, em particular na construção de uma Europa social e de uma Europa resiliente. Nós temos um histórico de muito boa execução dos fundos comunitários para estes fins, ou seja, não devolvemos dinheiro, usámo-lo todo e usámo-lo desta forma porque acreditamos muito que é aqui que vale a pena investir. E a última nota que queria deixar é reforçar uma ideia que já aqui passou, que tudo isto é sobre democracia. Aquilo que estamos a falar é promover democracia. Portugal é um país em que vale a pena estudar, a generalidade da União Europeia tem países em que vale a pena estudar, porque quem estuda, quem tem qualificação académica, tem tendencialmente melhor acesso a emprego, tem melhores remunerações e, sobretudo, é mais livre, porque aquilo que se aprende em processos de educação e formação é também dominar as ferramentas que, num mundo ultradigital, nos permitem ter a capacidade de avaliar criticamente aquilo que nos é servido no ecrã do telemóvel ou do computador, perceber que quando falamos de trabalho falamos de um direito, falamos mesmo de um direito, e que finalmente que temos aqui um papel de construção de uma sociedade cada vez mais qualificada, porque o maior contributo que a educação pode dar aos adultos é o seu valor intergeracional. Uma geração qualificada quer que os seus filhos sejam mais qualificados. Obrigado.
Thank you so much. And I know 5 minutes are really short, but these were 10 already. So we need to, I mean, I said it, but then I realized we might be on different interpretation channels. So I came up with a post-it instead. So you're gonna have 1 minute, 30 seconds and time out. And we can try to keep it shorter simply because like that we have more time to come back to some questions later on and maybe also interact with the rest of the participants. But in the meantime, thank you very much, João, for bringing on the table important topics like adult education, professional education, intergenerational dialogue, democracy, the use of EU tools. There was already a bunch of very interesting inputs. So I'm going to invite now Manuel to go ahead and maybe give us some more interesting inputs.
Okay, good morning. Thank you. I had a short presentation to show and to try to help me to be brief. First of all, I would like to thank Lifelong Learning Platform for inviting me to be here. It's a pleasure to participate in this Lifelong Learning Lab and to be with such a very high-level panel in the roundtable. Thank you very much. It's difficult to speak after the Secretary of State, so I'll try my best. May I share my presentation? Yeah,
yes, you have already screen sharing.
Yes, yes, thank you very much. Here you go. It is. Can you? Oh, okay. Thank you. So the idea was to tell you a little bit about the National Council of Education mission and competences, and to emphasize the participation, the stakeholders' participation in the process. So our council is an independent body with advisory functions. So we are a consultative body. Our mission is consultation. We have a president, and she's elected by the parliament. The council is responsible for issuing advice, opinions, and recommendations on all issues related to education. The council published the advice and recommendation, and we can do it, I will come back to this point, we can do it on our own initiative or in response to the requests by the parliament or by the government. And our mission, as it is stated in the law, is to provide the participation of various scientific, social and cultural and economic forces in the search for broad consensus regarding education policies. So here in the mission, you can see that there is a strong emphasis on stakeholder participation, but I will come back to that. So as I said, the council has a president elected by the parliament, which is a source of independence. Its membership, it's very broad and very diverse. Part of the members come from social participation and representation, stakeholders, and part of the members are experts that are elected by the council itself, that are co-opted, as we say. So we have a diversity of representation, and which is also a source of independence. Our advice and recommendation are published and are on education policies. And we try to combine evidence-based policy making with stakeholders' interests. Because of that diversity of membership and because of the way we work, and maybe I will have time to say something about that. An important point is the right of initiative. One of the questions that I was asked by you, by the organizers of this lab, was about how stakeholders manage to influence the agenda. In that way, it is possible within the council that stakeholders may influence the agenda because the council is able to put forward an advice on a topic that was not asked for. It is an own initiative. Another source of independence from the council is the public advice. Our advice is not negotiated, it is made public. It is published in the official state journal. We publish annually a report that became a reference, maybe I can say that. That is the state of education. You have the 2014 one on the right of the slide. It's a report that compiles the main indicators of the education in Portugal and shows clearly how the great way that we have made in the last 20 years in education in this country. We also published studies that we carry out ourselves or that we organize with other partners, mainly from universities and polytechnics. We organize a lot of hearings and seminars and conferences, and here you have the idea of combining also the best evidence available with the ideas, the reflections from researchers and from civil society, from the stakeholders, from all that are interested in education. We published the studies and our advices. Yes, I'm running. Let me tell you a few words about an organization that was set up in Portugal in the year 2000 in the Portuguese presidency of the EU, and the first president of this organization was Maria Teresa Ambrosio, that was at that time in the year 2000 the president of our council. We are a founding member of EUNEC. EUNEC is the European Network of Education Councils. You have in the slide an idea of our membership. We published a book in 2010 about education councils all over Europe, and we are now about to publish another book because of our 20 years anniversary on the consultation in education in Europe, Morocco, and Quebec in Canada. I think I can leave it here.
Thank you so much, Manuel. I was about to jump in, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was quite a run, wasn't it?
This infamous role. It's never nice to have to stop people talking, particularly when they say interesting things and you would like to know more rather than cut people short. So I'm really sorry that this that I have to have
you
this
didn't
role.
stop me anyway.
Thank you. So thank you so much again for this presentation. I think it would be interesting to hear more about what you were mentioning before, also the diversity of representation and how do you ensure the stakeholder participation, but we can come back to this later. For now, I would like to pass the floor to Noisa, if you want to come on the microphone.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I will start by sharing my screen, if I'm allowed to. And I would like to say thank you for the invitation to take part of this event. And I would also like to say hello to Dr. Luís Costa, Dr. Susana Oliveira, and Briquena, also, who I was able to be together in a previous event. So thank you very much for inviting me. I will try to share my screen with you. I will do it in a minute. So, I hope that you are able to see me now, as well as my presentation. Am I perfect? Am I saying the truth? Yeah, thank you very much. So I will do my presentation in Portuguese, although the slides are presented in English. Olá, muito bom dia a todos, muito obrigada pelo convite feito. Eu queria exatamente partilhar algumas ideias sobre aquilo que realmente é o tópico que me tem trazido algumas preocupações nos últimos tempos e que é a minha área de investigação, a questão do digital na educação. Lembrando que realmente é uma questão que não é específica no domínio da educação, ela é transversal a várias áreas e que também não é um domínio somente parte das preocupações no contexto europeu. Ele é realmente um movimento mundial e esta dimensão mundial importa assegurar. E gostaria também de assinalar que no contexto português a questão do digital na educação não é propriamente um movimento novo, ela é uma ambição nacional com largas décadas, fazendo uma historicidade muito rápida. Nós temos cerca de 35 anos de projetos que têm a ambição de colocar o digital na educação, fazendo jus àquilo que realmente era o digital nas décadas em causa. E ela, na verdade, dos factos, é hoje também atentamente olhada pelo domínio educativo e formativo, e, portanto, tem sido longa aquilo que realmente é a busca pela modernização do sistema educativo e formativo português, tanto nos artefactos, tanto na tecnologia, como também nas suas práticas. Atualmente, o plano de transição digital para a educação envolve vários eixos, portanto, ele não é só realmente o domínio da educação, ele envolve 3 grandes eixos, mas olhando especificamente para aquilo que é o primeiro eixo e que se liga exatamente com a capacitação e inclusão digital das pessoas, eu gostaria de partilhar convosco algumas das principais medidas que neste domínio se colocam, exatamente a título informativo e para depois poder conjugar algumas ideias daquilo que tem sido o trabalho que na área tem desenvolvido, com vista a sistematizar pontos de relevo e fatores de sucesso para tentarmos atingir estas medidas. E, portanto, há uma agenda específica no domínio da educação,
de promoção daquilo que são educação digital, formação digital, educação entenda-se aqui num sentido amplo, naquilo que é o espectro, tem medidas específicas e, em específico, eu vou centrar-me naquilo que é atualmente o plano de digitalização para as escolas, um conceito difícil de traduzir para o inglês de forma perfeita e que procura não só promover acesso a equipamento individual, ajustado às idades, mas também serviços de conectividade para alunos, docentes e formadores, um plano de capacitação digital de professores e formadores, o desenvolvimento e a disponibilização de recursos educativos digitais, tanto naquilo que são os manuais escolares, como os cadernos de atividade digitais, testes interativos, preparação de exames, relatórios de progressos, também adicionando a isto aquilo que são hoje definidos como ecossistemas digitais, portanto, plataformas e serviços de colaboração digitais que permitam não só às escolas trabalhar per si, entre os seus, mas também entre si, ou seja, com a comunidade e com outros parceiros, e esta preocupação de criar medidas para aquilo que são as provas de avaliação externa realmente adotarem um formato digital. Portanto, de forma global, eu diria que este programa que agora está em cima da mesa, no contexto português, é um programa que promove e pretende trazer as tecnologias digitais como um valor importante a colocar ao serviço da educação e ao serviço da formação, mas sobretudo de trazê-las, as tecnologias digitais, como um valor acrescido, ou, na verdade, a preocupação de trazê-las para criar valor a estes temas. E é nesta visão incrementada do que a tecnologia pode realmente trazer para a aprendizagem ao longo da vida, que importa então sinalizar como é que, sendo estas ambições tão relevantes e tão ajustadas àquilo que é a agenda europeia, mas como inicialmente enunciei, a agenda global, que hoje se coloca no domínio da virtualização da nossa atividade social, há alguns pontos que eu gostaria de assinalar neste 1 minuto que me sobra. Portanto, pensar que a tecnologia tem que trazer para a educação valor em si e que esse valor é acrescentar àquilo que se faz na educação, portanto, não é para fazer o mesmo, é para fazer mais complexo, fazer mais rico e tentar exatamente criar dimensão concretizada do que a tecnologia nos pode trazer. E, portanto, é tentar trazer modelos que realmente não trazem a tecnologia para substituir práticas tradicionais, mas sim para redefinir o que são as práticas na educação e na formação. E é importante dizer que a tecnologia não deve, sobretudo, ser entendida como a resposta. A tecnologia aqui é mais a pergunta que se faz e o porquê de trazer a tecnologia, muito mais nas tecnologias, nas competências digitais do que na tecnologia digital, é realmente porque elas são garantia, ou pelo menos requisito, se não forem garantia, pelo menos requisito de acesso àquilo que é a cidadania, aos direitos e os deveres associados à cidadania e, obviamente, uma plena inclusão e uma plena oportunidade de aprendizagem ao longo da vida. Outros fatores de sucesso que gostaria de assinalar, esta preocupação de ter noção de que tudo isto envolve um tempo específico, que realmente tem que se fazer acontecer, e todas estas medidas têm que acontecer no mesmo tempo, ao mesmo tempo. Em momentos anteriores, o que nós vemos é que projetos nesta área fazem com que cada uma destas atividades aconteça no seu tempo e depois nada acontece harmoniosamente. A preocupação com percebermos que não só nos traz exigência à tecnologia, mas ela também em si pode ser um alavancar de muita da nossa atualização que precisamos fazer ao nível dos currícula. Ter noção de que realmente temos que investir na qualidade da formação que damos a professores, e aqui professores é num sentido bastante amplo do conceito, e pensar exatamente naquilo que será a sustentabilidade destes modelos, caso contrário eles esgotam-se no momento em que tiverem terminado. E para terminar e corresponder ao que está a ser indicado, eu queria apenas assinalar aqui um ponto que me é particularmente querido, porque fala nas gerações de hoje e fala nas gerações de futuro, que é exatamente a tecnologia como sendo uma forma ou um requisito para garantir acesso a empregos decentes. E esta questão da tecnologia como meio de acesso a empregos decentes, acho que para todos nós deve ser um ponto muito sério a auscultar, a refletir e a agir em conformidade. Muito obrigada pelo convite.
Thank you so much, Noisa. Thank you so much for the presentation, and seeing you in the presentation was incredible. I've seen comments. I think next up you should give us a tutorial on how to do that, because I think it's also more engaging to see people in the same spot. I also would like to take a second to acknowledge that digital technologies for sure are relevant, and I really much agree on the issues of the added value and how they are interconnected with access and rights. So there is all these things, but also to just replicate what Alberto was saying, there is in the chat, there is now almost 100 participants from more than 20 countries. So this is a good time to bring in your perspective, start typing in the chat if there is anything. I see already some comments here and there on pedagogy over technology and other comments. So please jump in the chat and give your own opinions as I pass on the floor to Ivan.
Bom, antes de mais, muito obrigado. Eu espero que estejam a ouvir em condições, tudo bem. Bom, quero agradecer-vos este convite, agradecer à plataforma e dizer-vos também que se eu estiver a exceder o meu tempo, interrompam-me, por favor, porque para tentar que não nos atrasemos em demasia. E quero cumprimentar naturalmente os outros oradores. Não é fácil falar em conjunto com um painel de especialistas que trabalham muito mais sobre estes temas do que eu, e permitam-me também que dê um cumprimento especial ao nosso secretário de Estado da Educação, que também lidera estes temas ao longo dos últimos 6 anos no nosso país e que tem contribuído, em conjunto com toda a equipa governativa, para que Portugal invertesse o caminho que vinha a ser seguido, mas isso é algo que também podemos falar a seguir. Eu quando fui convidado, também me convidaram como ex-dirigente associativo, confesso-vos que, e do lado dos estudantes, despachando já essa parte, fui dirigente associativo no Instituto Superior Técnico e depois também na FER, numa federação que pretende congregar todos os estudantes a nível nacional à volta destes temas, precisamente para que os estudantes possam ser parceiros efetivos na discussão destes temas e para que não exista alguma fragmentação que em Portugal é sempre típica no movimento associativo estudantil, e para que os estudantes sejam parceiros efetivos sobre estes temas. Hoje já estou do lado do legislador, já há alguns anos, e portanto o caminho que me parece que é importante que seja seguido é no fundo o caminho que Portugal tem vindo a seguir ao longo dos últimos anos, até porque sabemos que a qualificação se assume como um pilar de desenvolvimento e de promoção da coesão de qualquer país, e para isso é necessário, e os Estados têm esse papel, no sentido de garantir que exista a educação e a formação necessárias, especialmente num tempo como aquele em que nós vivemos, em que as mudanças numa sociedade digital, em que todas as mudanças ocorrem a uma velocidade tremenda e em que há uma necessidade constante ao longo das nossas vidas de que estejamos sempre a aprender, a reaprender e a tomar contacto com alguns conceitos que até há poucos anos não existiam. Ainda para mais quando sabemos que ao longo dos próximos anos, com a proliferação da inteligência artificial e da utilização de máquinas que cada vez mais podem substituir as tarefas que os humanos desempenham numa série de funções, o nosso futuro enquanto comunidade, o futuro dos nossos trabalhos, o futuro dos nossos rendimentos está também muito associado a esta possibilidade de nós nos podermos ir adequando e de fazermos formação ao longo da nossa vida. Todos nós conhecemos o mantra neoliberal que afirma que o emprego para a vida acabou. Eu não tenho a certeza que o emprego para a vida tenha acabado, mas há uma coisa que tenho quase certeza, é que alguém desempenhar a mesma função exatamente desde que começa a sua carreira profissional até que a termina, é algo que provavelmente não vamos experienciar e que a minha geração com certeza não vai viver e se calhar ainda bem. E, portanto, hoje em dia também sabemos que não basta estudar no início da vida. Eu posso-vos dar o meu exemplo pessoal, eu estudei Engenharia Biológica não há muito tempo, mas sei que hoje, se quiser fazer Engenharia Biológica, há muitos dos conceitos que estudei há 10 anos atrás que estão absolutamente desatualizados. E sobre esta vertente é importante que a educação ao longo da vida seja fomentada, mas também do ponto de vista da obtenção de formações complementares que nos capacitem para obter aquilo que a oradora que me antecedeu também referiu na parte final, a questão, doutora Ana Pedro, a questão dos empregos decentes e empregos que sejam justamente remunerados. E para além, como é óbvio, da dimensão que é aquela mais relevante, ou melhor, que é uma das dimensões mais relevantes e que em Portugal é tida como tem sido mais relevante, que é o facto de nós conseguirmos formar ao longo da vida pessoas e garantir competências a pessoas que não tiveram a oportunidade na sua juventude de fazer formações e de fazer o seu percurso, aquele que agora, para a minha geração, é tido como adequado, partindo de uma premissa muito simples e que para nós parece que é comum, é de que para que o cidadão seja absolutamente livre, tem que ter a qualificação a formação que lhe permita desempenhar as suas funções, ter o seu trabalho com qualidade, porque não há outra forma de poder verdadeiramente atingir liberdade. No caso português, é bom também relembrar que quando aconteceu a Revolução, e termino já em um minuto, quando aconteceu a Revolução em 1974, um quarto dos portugueses era analfabeto, e esta era... A ausência de qualificações era quase ideologia de regime, nós não tínhamos universidades como temos hoje, o número de cidadãos que prosseguia para o ensino superior era reduzidíssimo, mas sabemos que ainda hoje as qualificações são um direito que são negados a muitos cidadãos, embora esse caminho tenha vindo a ser invertido ao longo dos últimos anos, e mesmo para terminar também referir essa questão. Apenas em 2005 houve vários programas ao longo das últimas décadas de formação de adultos, mas a partir de 2005 esta questão foi colocada na agenda política a propósito dos Centros de Novas Oportunidades, que foi revertido pelo anterior governo de direita, mas que este governo, através também dos Centros Qualifica, soube recuperar e soube lhe dar um novo impulso e voltar a colocar na agenda política, porque de facto o Estado português tem uma dívida. O Secretário de Estado João Costa já o referiu e muito bem, tem uma dívida para com todos estes portugueses que ao longo de décadas não tiveram a formação que o Estado português lhes devia e aos quais lhe negou. E, portanto, continuar este caminho é aquilo que me parece que será feito em Portugal e que terá que ser feito. E continuaremos o nosso debate. Eu não vou, já percebi que já esgotei aqui, tinha mais alguns pontos que me gostaria de ir, mas temos o tempo para o nosso debate. Mais uma vez, muito obrigado por este convite e me terem também ouvido este período.
Thank you so much, Ivan, and for sure we will go back. I think it would also be really beneficial for the topic of this whole debate, that is also how to bring stakeholders and institutions closer together in cooperation and cross-sectorially, but also between different institutions and stakeholders. I think your path can definitely be an added value, to go back to what we said before in the discussion. So to move forward from that, I'm going to invite Dina Chuero to maybe share. I don't know if with the shared screen you can see my post-its, but I do hope you can, otherwise I'll have to jump in. I'm really sorry. Because I see there is a lot going on in the chat and I really encourage it, but I think it's nice to discuss this also later on.
Olá, muito bom dia. Se me permitem, eu vou compartilhar a minha tela e falar em português. Eu penso que já estão a acompanhar, muito obrigada. Antes de mais, eu gostaria de dar os parabéns à Lifelong Learning Platform por esta iniciativa, esta magnífica equipa que está a permitir este funcionamento destes 2 dias de forma excelente. Muito obrigada pelo convite e pela oportunidade. E queria cumprimentar também as pessoas que estão nesta mesa, com quem eu tenho o privilégio, a honra de partilhar, e todos que participam. Muito obrigada. Nós sabemos que, e o Sr. Secretário de Estado acabou de nos dizer, temos um número significativo de pessoas adultas envolvidas no programa Qualifiquem Muito Bem, um programa que tem feito o seu caminho com muito sucesso, com grande envolvimento e trabalho e dedicação dos profissionais que estão a trabalhar na educação de adultos formal, mas temos ainda... o processo dos censos este ano está a decorrer, vamos ver os resultados da informação que nos traz a este nível da alfabetização, mas também sabemos que é autorreportado, ou seja, alguém preenche, no caso da pessoa não saber ler nem escrever, o questionário dos censos, indicando se sabe ou não sabe ler, portanto, pode haver aqui, naquilo que nós conhecemos do terreno, podemos estar a ver apenas a ponta do iceberg. Eu não quero ser pessimista, até porque sou educadora de adultos, portanto sou otimista por natureza. Mas ainda temos muito, muito que fazer e a este nível precisamos nos envolver todos. O problema da iliteracia é um problema social que é um desafio que temos todos de abraçar. A esse nível, o governo português teve uma importante iniciativa, que foi solicitar o apoio da Comissão Europeia e da Associação Europeia para a Educação de Adultos, que do ponto de vista técnico apoiou a construção do Plano Nacional de Literacia de Adultos, que excelentemente coordenado pela Susana Oliveira, e este processo foi um processo muito participado, de cocriação e de envolvimento de muitos parceiros, organizações da sociedade civil, especialistas, a academia, empresas, naturalmente as autarquias, as bibliotecas, entre outros atores muito relevantes, e todos são precisos para trabalhar este desafio. Foi um trabalho também de investigação, coordenado pelo professor Luís Rodes, e deu origem a um plano que nós estamos com muita expectativa, e apelo ao Sr. Secretário de Estado que nos ajude a ter este plano implementado o mais rápido possível, porque é urgente. Estiveram envolvidos nos grupos de desenvolvimento, eu tive a oportunidade e o privilégio de coordenar um deles, estiveram envolvidas mais de 200 pessoas, e essas pessoas estão na expectativa de poder participar no processo de implementação. Temos aqui muita esperança, mas na verdade tivemos uma desilusão recente. Nós tínhamos a perspectiva do Plano Nacional de Literacia de Adultos estar contemplado no Plano de Recuperação e Resiliência. Quando o documento veio a consulta pública, estavam previstos 110 milhões e 600 projetos, mas afinal agora são só 40 milhões e 225 projetos. Isto de facto deixou-nos um bocadinho desiludidos, embora, porque de facto nós precisamos de ter um sustentado e estável investimento para a sustentabilidade e a profissionalização da educação de adultos e da literacia de adultos. Este estado de arte da educação de adultos em Portugal precisa de facto de mais flexibilidade, mais diversificação, descentralização, com as estruturas a comunicar e a trabalhar melhor, aproveitando a riqueza do que se faz em educação não formal, os profissionais, por exemplo, os animadores. Hoje discute-se também, vota-se o estatuto do animador, são também atores relevantes neste processo. De facto, estas estruturas descentralizadas, situadas, contextualizadas, baseadas também num envolvimento da comunidade, permitem de facto ter mais adultos envolvidos em aprendizagem e educação ao longo da vida. Uma ação integrada do ponto de vista não só educativo, mas também ao nível social, por exemplo, envolvendo as IPSS e outros atores relevantes no terreno, substituindo uma perspectiva assistencialista por uma perspectiva empoderadora. Não significa só dar dinheiro às pessoas para poderem participar, mas promover condições que facilitem a participação. Por exemplo, o acesso, mas também o sucesso. Por exemplo, a esse nível, as mulheres, nós sabemos, e com a pandemia ainda mais, estão em grande...
I'm sorry, your time is up.
Ok. Então, obrigada. Eu vou terminar dizendo que, de facto, nós precisamos de uma estratégia de educação de adultos e aprendizagem ao longo da vida, que vá além da qualificação, que promova de facto uma educação para todos, para a cidadania, para a felicidade, não só para o trabalho, que é importante. A qualificação é muito importante, mas não chega, e temos de envolver toda a gente, incluindo os idosos. A educação de adultos é um direito humano e um bem público que devíamos preservar e lutar por ele. Estamos aqui a fazer, e o meu convite é mantenham a fé, e se quiserem visitar ou revisitar este ano que celebramos o centenário de Paulo Freire, a Pedagogia da Esperança. Muito obrigada.
Thank you so much, Dina. Thank you so much. I think there was a very important aspect that you mentioned, this co-creation and participatory approach, which is always very much important in creating successful lifelong learning strategies. Luis, how do you feel about being the last after this number of very interesting contributions?
Well, Pina, thank you. Bom dia a todos, obrigado. Para terminar esta viagem de costa a costa, começou com um Costa e termina com outro Costa, já que se recorreu aqui à analogia do mar, eu vou tentar facilitar a vida à Pina e usar os 5 minutos ou um pouco menos e falar, centrar-me, focalizar-me na questão da formação inicial de jovens em Portugal, digamos assim, que eu guio de uma forma represento da Associação Nacional das Escolas Profissionais. Basicamente, os tópicos essenciais que eu queria transmitir eram os seguintes. Portanto, o novo ensino profissional que nós temos, o novo, entre aspas, tem 33 anos e é o resultado de uma relação virtuosa entre políticas públicas, envolvimento dos atores sociais e da sociedade civil e apoios europeus. Sem o Fundo Social Europeu e sem o FEDER, não era possível ter a esta escala o ensino profissional que temos em Portugal, podia haver outro, mas não seria necessariamente a mesma coisa. O novo ensino profissional, portanto, com 33 anos, na idade em que Cristo morreu, portanto, não importa revelar, foi desenvolvido uma perspectiva bottom-up, ou seja, portanto, nasceu de baixo para cima, foi no terreno, na sociedade civil, digamos que ele foi construído, continua a manter, ao fim destes anos, todos a mesma identidade. Portanto, os destinatários são jovens com 9 anos de escolaridade, a duração de 3 anos, a garantia de dupla certificação escolar e profissional, forte ligação da escola com as empresas, nas quais se desenvolve cerca de 1/4 do plano curricular. A possibilidade de progredir para o ensino superior, embora por caminhos mais sinuosos, que infelizmente até agora ainda não foram completamente removidos no princípio da igualdade de acesso. Portanto, isto para vos dizer que os primeiros diplomados nesta nova modalidade de ensino profissional desenvolvida em Portugal a partir de 1989, portanto, em menos de 30 anos, porque os primeiros diplomados só saíram em 1991, podemos dizer que hoje, grosso modo, 40% dos alunos no nível secundário estão em percurso de certificação e, ao mesmo tempo, podemos dizer que mais ou menos mais de 500 mil de jovens foram qualificados ao longo deste percurso, uma vez que o arranque foi ténue e neste momento o sistema produz 30, 40 mil jovens diplomados por ano no seu conjunto. A ambição do governo português, devidamente anunciada, é de chegar aos 50%, mas essa dificuldade às vezes surge, às vezes parece que a vontade é um bocadinho fraca, mas isto é, digamos, de costa a costa, portanto, um recado. Portanto, basicamente eu queria sinalizar o triplo efeito deste percurso. Em primeiro lugar, é seguramente o contributo para o abandono escolar precoce. Não é o único, tem uma conjugação de políticas, mas necessariamente o ensino profissional deu um contributo decisivo para que em poucos anos se chegasse aos níveis atuais de Portugal cumprir o indicador benchmarking da Estratégia 2020 e, portanto, abaixo dos 10% dos jovens. O segundo contributo é necessariamente para injetar no tecido económico e social um conjunto de jovens qualificados significativos que permitiram elevar a qualificação global da economia portuguesa e a reforçar, digamos, a capacidade de resposta produtiva e, ao mesmo tempo, obviamente, formar cidadãos mais conscientes e com maiores possibilidades, como já aqui foi referido. Finalmente, um contributo significativo, mas reduzido, para, já agora, e de acordo com as metas europeias, atingir o indicador de benchmarking da estratégia de 2020, uma vez que há pouco tempo um membro do governo, no Estado de Estado do Ensino Superior, dizia, há 3 ou 4 anos, só 16% dos alunos do ensino profissional chegam ao ensino superior. E a resposta foi um pouco já, porque os obstáculos que têm existido ainda não foram todos devidamente removidos e, portanto, há um progresso significativo e as medidas recentes do atual governo facilitam têm facilitado de alguma forma ou contribuído de alguma forma para que isso aconteça. Portanto, em síntese, nem tudo são rosas, já que estamos com um governo socialista, há muito caminho de percorrer, há dificuldades, há muitos obstáculos, há problemas velhos e problemas novos, há problemas que, obviamente, emergem com esta crise, mas, portanto, julgo que, ao fim deste tempo, estamos no bom caminho e podemos fazer um balanço positivo desta experiência. Finalmente, e já que estamos num território europeu e muito ativa a questão do plano de recuperação, como foi sublinhado aqui ontem pela Margarida Marques, deputada do Parlamento Europeu, 10% do plano de recuperação deve ser dedicado portanto, à educação. Há que registar que em Portugal isso aconteceu, talvez um pouco acima, mas já agora também dizer que, obviamente, as escolas profissionais têm uma grande expectativa de que ele venha a contribuir, e tenho a certeza disso, para a modernização da oferta formativa em linha com as ambições dos jovens e das necessidades do tecido económico e social. Muito obrigado.
Thank you so much, Luis. We also have a message of appreciation for your metaphors, and definitely thank you for reminding us also of the importance of education in the Recovery and Resilience Facility and the importance to invest a certain percentage of it in that. Now the time is running up, but I have some final questions and remarks that I'm sure all of you want to make. There is also an incredible conversation going on in the chat on digital education and what does it, what exactly it entails and the importance of personal development as such, and citizenship and happiness and all of that. I'm gonna leave that in the chat for now, because this is unfortunately, I mean, it's a very interesting topic, but not the specific topic of this panel. So I would like to refocus us a bit on the issue of cooperation in education and training in bringing about change in in the political landscape and agenda, and whom best to ask these questions to than those who are in decision-making positions. Not that civil society isn't. I think in the power. I believe in the power of civil society. I think we are all the proof of it. But I would like to turn 1 second to João for one question on actually the role of education and training agenda. We have seen from the study that the information and the knowledge about the education and training agenda is very different among different stakeholders in Portugal. What do you think can be done to bring about more knowledge and engagement from Portuguese stakeholders in the European agenda? And also please take the time to address any final remark you have. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to be stricter on time, so I'm going to give you all a minute and a half, a bit more, and I'm gonna start the timer and leave my microphone on. So if you hear the beep, beep, beep at the end of it, sorry about it. Go ahead.
Thank you, Pina. I'll be very, very brief. There's two aspects I want to comment based on your question. One is when we talk about the role of the community and non-official organizations in lifelong learning, I think we cannot, I'm being very strong about it, we cannot dismiss the crucial role of certification. It's very comfortable to say this is only about education and certification is not so relevant when we already have a degree, when we already have a job, and we don't put ourselves in the shoes of others. And this is to address in particular one comment by Dina Suero. It's whatever appears in our PRR, Plan for Recovery and Resilience, has to mirror the specific needs of the population. We have a very good system of recognition and validation of competencies. They can be acquired wherever, and all that these organizations have to do is to prepare the adults and then take them to one of our centros qualifica for the recognition and the validation of their competence. And someone said at some point, I don't know who, that this is not all about work, it's about happiness, but try to be unemployed and look for your full happiness during the period of unemployment. You won't find it for sure. So this is a commitment with a very low-skilled society due to years and years of early dropout, and we have to respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, João. And we have really like 5 last minutes for final comments. If there is any question from people who have been participating, please type them in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to ask this same question that I have to the rest of the people in this roundtable. Does anyone else of you want to answer to this question, and how can we bring closer the European and training agenda to the national level, and how can we improve the knowledge and engagement of national stakeholders with the European education and training agenda? It's a very hard question. I admit it's not an easy task.
Yeah,
no,
it's a quite hard question, and it's the question that we take two full days to talk about it, not in 5 minutes. But I would like to add just one idea to this, which is we should focus on local problems. That is absolutely true, and we have to localize solutions, but we really need to work as an European Union. It's different to have like an European agenda and to try to do it locally. I think we really need to think about accreditation and recognition on a cross-board approach, and we have that for higher education. We need that for other areas. We need that for vocational and professional training, and we have to have it in a solid and really qualified and recognized way. So this is something that I would like to see happening in the near future.
Thanks a lot. I'm going to jump onto another question, because one of the objectives. Sorry, Manuel, go ahead, please.
Okay, very shortly. I believe that European Union managed to influence education policies all over Europe. Although we have to bear in mind that education is a matter for our government, it's not an European matter. As far as I'm concerned, I would say that we manage in the National Council of Education and in the European Network of Education Councils, we manage to involve stakeholders and to involve stakeholders in discussing, in providing ideas to set agenda and to change, to participate in the decision-making process for education policies. I think we need organized and structured consultation, and not very open and disorganized like coffee chat consultation. We need structured and informed and organized consultation, and in this consultation all over Europe and also in Portugal, stakeholders manage to participate. I just shared an advice of our council on adult education that was published in 2019, and it has had a huge participation of stakeholders as well as experts.
Thank you, Manuel. I'm going to ask one super quick last question so that I can get the last word from Ivan, Dina, and Luis, if you want to comment. So to you, I would like to ask you a question concerning stakeholders' engagement. We've seen from the feasibility studies responses that there is a moderate cooperation between stakeholders in Portugal. Do you agree, and do you see any space for improvement? And in your case, Ivan, do you see any space for improvement in cooperation between policymakers and representative organizations and other stakeholders?
Bom, um dos setores onde acho que podia claramente existir uma melhoria, já o referi até na primeira intervenção, tem a ver com a participação dos estudantes e com as organizações de estudantes neste tipo de decisões. Mas grande parte desse problema também passa por os estudantes estarem devidamente organizados. Esse é um trabalho que tem vindo a ser feito ao longo dos últimos anos. Não sei se o Luís também, já que temos pouco tempo sobre este tema, também não quer estar a monopolizar.
Eu diria apenas que estamos a falar de uma matéria que merece o maior consenso na sociedade portuguesa em geral, não é? Devo dizer que a primeira vez que houve um acordo na concertação social em Portugal, assinado por todos os parceiros, todas as organizações patronais e sindicais, foi exatamente há 30 anos, portanto em julho de 1991, e portanto depois disso têm acontecido outros momentos, e há espaço de participação, agora se são devidamente aproveitados ou não vou agora aqui dedicar-me a isso, mas o espaço de participação existe a vários níveis, da Agência da Qualificação, no Conselho Nacional de Educação, no Instituto de Emprego e Formação Profissional, portanto, existe espaço de participação. Se é o melhor ou o pior, se é o suficiente, isso é outro assunto, mas não é para aqui, mas as portas estão abertas, obviamente.
Se me permitem, eu gostaria de acrescentar que, de facto, há já um trabalho no sentido de promover essa participação, esse envolvimento, esse trabalho em rede que é extremamente importante, mas saliento aqui o papel das autarquias, das juntas de freguesia, dos municípios, das câmaras municipais, que passam a ter mais competências também ao nível da educação e podem aqui ter um papel muito relevante ao nível local. Não esquecendo, e concordo com a perspectiva da Neuza, não esquecendo que o local tem de estar relacionado com a nossa perspectiva mais ampla, europeia e até e mundial. Portanto, é o local, não é? Global e local ao mesmo tempo. Muito obrigada.
Thank you so much. Perfect timing, because we just also got a message that João needs to leave. So thank you everyone for participating in today's discussion. This was, thank you very much, Alberto also. I'm really sorry about the strict timing, but it was really interesting. I hope we will have more opportunities to discuss these details more in depth through structured cooperation in the future. So thanks a lot to all of you for contributing. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did, and I hope everyone else enjoyed. Now, before we move on, thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Now, before we move on, we have a tiny video for you to have a look at, and this video is a video on the main EU policy priorities. Now, this is also a video that will help you get oriented in what's coming next, which is the labs. So please have a look at it. I hope the music put you all in a breaky mood, dancey mood, breaky, dancey mood, because we're going on a 4-minute break. So you have 4 minutes to dance your way to your coffee, your toilet, wherever you have to go, and then we come back and we go into the lab. Maybe I can ask the support if you're interested. Just feel free to write to the support group if you want to have the link to the video and watch it again or anything. And see you back again at 12 Central European time, 11 Portugal time. I don't know in which other time zones you are, but see you again in 4 minutes. Enjoy your break.
Welcome back. We'll just wait a few more seconds just to see if we get more people, all the people in back from the conversations. Just so that you know why I'm talking. It's not only because I enjoy the attention, it's also because I have the role to facilitate a very short moment to have a look at what all the different conversations produced. Thank you everyone for coming back. So just a little to get a short feedback from your experience in the conversation, could I ask you to put in the chat one word that describes your impression from the conversations you just had? You know, feel free to say whatever you would like, from, you know, positive, negative, intriguing. Okay, participation, great. Unity, promising, encouraged. All right, this is mostly positive. Very good. Heart values transformation. Thank you, Dina. Inclusion. Okay, so while you please keep on putting your word in the chat, I'll just explain what we're going to do. So you were looking at different European mechanisms that can have an impact on national education agendas. And what we're going to do is look at the results of all the conversations on these different mechanisms. After we go over that, it will be a little bit of a mind dump, so please bear with me, but it's only so that you can have an overview. You will have an opportunity to vote on what you consider to be the most promising ideas in terms of establishing a connection, cooperation between the EU and national level. Okay, so at this stage, if you, the idea is not to vote on the conversations you are in, is to take a step back and think, okay, out of everything that I heard and I'm seeing on the board, these are the most promising ideas, and you'll get 3 votes to do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen. I hope that will be okay. And I'll go over the brief results from the conversations using a platform we used yesterday called Miro. For now, I just share my screen, and then you'll actually get a link to get in there yourselves. So let me see if this works first. Sharing my screen. Magic of Zoom. Can you give me a thumbs up either as an emoticon or your real thumb, just to tell me that you're watching? Okay, that's perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna, this is very, it can get a little psychedelic sometimes because you can zoom in and out, okay? So for each of the conversations, we're gonna look at what are the key ideas around how the mechanism influenced the national agenda, how it affects stakeholder interactions, and what else could be done around that mechanism, okay? So the first one, also one thing that I thought, you will see a lot of acronyms, because people that work in European field, they love to use acronyms. I don't know why. it's a way of excluding everybody else from the conversation. So I'll just put the acronyms that you're gonna find there on the chat in case you have doubts about what is meant, but it's kind of self-explanatory. So coming back to the mechanism. So the first one was the recovery and resilience plans, which have both an European and national dimension. How people felt that the national agenda will be influenced or is influenced is that most budget is going to infrastructures and not directly impacting education systems. And that this particular view of student organizations, they can join forces and use the cooperation to pressure the involvement of students in the decision making. In terms of stakeholder interaction, recovering resilience plans can promote partnership and cooperation with other organizations, and again put pressure on governments and hold them accountable. And yeah, so basically these 2 points might be similar. So if the writer on this wants to nuance the difference between the two, you're still welcome to do it. While I read, if there's something that speaks to you and you want to try to influence your other colleagues in the room, in the voting, you can put comments in the chat. Feel free. So in terms of what more can be done on resilience and recovery, I'm gonna zoom in here a little bit. Have a clear political commitment. For instance, 10% of the budget could go for education, and use more marketing as a way to promote existing opportunities and funding schemes. Another additional idea might be turn intentions into actions. For instance, the National Recovery and Resilience Plans could introduce quality of monitoring on CSO's involvement and midterm evaluation. And we could tailor policies to the needs of learners and citizens. Okay, so that was recovery and resilience plans. Let's now look at the measure, which is the Conference on the Future of Europe. Okay, so how it impacted the national agendas is just a simple idea of more democratic participation will boost an affinity with EU. In terms on stakeholders, there's an idea that stakeholders' relationships are still broken. And so this conference could actually be a great way of connecting them and make citizens be aware of other national realities. What more could be done? European member states are hesitant to involve citizens in decisions, and the decisions are not aware of opportunities. So I guess the invitation is to address these problems or obstacles. So let me see, that was for the Conference on the Future of Europe. Let's now look at the European Pillar of Social Rights. Okay, so here in terms of affecting national agendas, the European Pillar of Social Rights is recent, but is reflected in VET strategies and in Portugal with aligned objectives. And this was specifically for Portugal's experience. Importance of vocational education in Portugal to achieve the European Pillar of Social Rights objectives, namely regarding employment. Here, in terms of stakeholders, VETs could cooperate with organizations for integration of international students. For example, each classroom could have the name of a company. Initial VET cooperation with continuing VET and higher education. One more could be done. Institutionalize the national lifelong learning platforms, more flexible pathways for stakeholder cooperation between adult education, VET, and higher education, create networks using technological online tools. Okay. So that was for the pillar on social rights. Okay, take a deep breath. We're just halfway there. Now we're going to look at the last three. So now we're looking at a very intriguing European education area by 2025 in terms of impact on national agendas, facilitation of mobility of students and educators, inclusion, language support, digitalization to decrease administrative burden. And at the international level, students active in promoting citizenship, education towards a pan-European initiative. In terms of the stakeholders, an international network, let me see if I can come close, an international network to mobilize multiple stakeholders, from researchers to politicians to practitioners, and cooperation with different stakeholders. And here you can actually read them. Okay, what else could be done in terms of the education area? Support tools for students, incoming and outgoing, more accessible support tools, financial sustainability of tools and guides, and recognize heart as means to boost citizenship inclusion, and put it at the heart of educational and transformation. Someone got very poetically creative there in a tiny post-it on Miro, who could think it's possible. Digital transition, influence on national agendas, big influence, direction of digital policies, opportunity to build diverse partnerships and start implementing changes. On stakeholders, building partnerships takes time, so this must be considered, and there's a big consideration for the impact that COVID had on education, so what that will do, and the requirement to work together. And also helping to establish inclusive networks to find solutions to digital skills. What else could be done in terms of the digital transition? We could continue promoting networks across communities and create a focus point for digital education policies. And last but not the least, we're talking about the green transition, green competences. In terms of impact on national agendas, there's a difficulty to influence policy making, given that there's some form of rigidness in terms of the national structures. There's a certain detachment of policy making at EU and national level from individuals and society. So it's important to use project-based evidence and disseminate results. In terms of the stakeholders, the mindset of parents is changing to children's exposure to environmental issues. So it's not just parents towards children that the learning happens. Interaction with all levels and all actors of education so that they can understand each other. And what else could be done? Again, a support for a national lifelong learning platform in terms of connecting different levels of policy making. More experience-based learning for all ages, direct experience with nature was an example we gave, and use the full potential of Erasmus Plus and focus on changing the mindset of adults. Okay, so this was quite a sum. So now you get a chance, you get a few minutes to actually get into the Miro board yourselves and browse around and vote on 3 promising ideas, okay? Take a step backward and look at the ones that you feel we should be supporting. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can look at one another more easily. And now you will be able to get into the link that is on your chat. And once you are there, you see a bunch of little icons. Actually, I could maybe just quickly share my screen again. You see a bunch of little icons, and on the bottom left part, there's a little thumb here. And when you click in there, you'll have an opportunity to vote. Yeah, I'm an editor, so I'm seeing things I should not be seeing. But that's where you'll find your voting possibility, is this little blue. Okay, the platform has started the voting. You'll have 2 minutes to vote, and I'll let you do that. If you're having any trouble with, accessing the Miro or finding the voting icon or anything, you can just put it in the chat and we'll try to address it. I see all the little busy arrows moving. So there was quite a lot on partnership, either addressing separation between different sectors, different levels, or just encouraging cooperation and shared knowledge, shared awareness of the different levels, intentions. quite a bit of comments also on another form of disconnection, which is between the EU and national conversations, and a few promising ideas in terms of how to bridge those two. Some support for lifelong learning national platforms for different reasons. Okay, you have 1 minute to complete your voting. Okay, I'm quite curious to see what's going to come out. We will be able to see both in terms of promising ideas, but also mechanisms that speak more to people if we find more votes on a particular mechanism than those. "20 seconds, last opportunity." Okay, so the voting is now complete, and in a moment we'll be able to see the results. So actually, now it's processing the results. If you are on Miro yourselves, you can click again in the thumb and you'll be able to see the results and browse them. But I'll actually share my screen again and show you. You should be able to see the whole voting on the right and the results on the left. I cannot increase the results. So interestingly enough, the idea that got most votes was more democratic participation as a way to boost EU integration. So LLP got the work cut out for them. Then equally with 5 votes, we have the idea of recognizing heart as a means to boost citizenship, inclusion, and put at the heart of education process and transformation. So that was poetry wins. The other one, the support for a national lifelong learning platform as a big connector of the different policy making levels. And then the other, I'll just mention these other 4 because the rest you can actually browse for yourself. So the other, not 4, the ones that got 4 votes. So the idea of having more flexible pathways for different stakeholders in the different levels of education to cooperate, and also a kind of an invitation for raising awareness of opportunities for European citizens. If that is okay, I'm gonna leave it at that. I'll give you one last opportunity to put a comment on the chat. If there's anything, maybe you are shocked by these results, or maybe you're very happy with these results. What the team that is so kindly hosting and guiding us today will do is take all of these into a report of our meeting and offer some form of insight of what seems to be the trends and orientation from the participants in this event. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now, and I think I'm going to pass it to Aria to do the last piece of our time together.
Thank you very much, Luis, for guiding us so skillfully through the comments that have come up, ideas, comments, proposals that have come up in the different breakout rooms. I must say I'm very happy that the recognition of the heart and art got so many votes. I think that's a very important point, and we will certainly take that back to the European level and to other conversations. What I also see from the results is, yes, a lot of work coming up for a lifelong learning platform, not only for putting together the report of this wonderful meeting, but also to establish new occasions where these things can be discussed on other national levels in other countries. And I would like to share with you that the next meeting in this, the next lab, if you like, is being planned in France for 2022. So please come and join us there. We will tell you then what has happened in the meantime and what is happening in France on the grassroots level. And I think that will be also very interesting. We would like to thank all of you for your participation and your great contributions. Of course, specifically to all our speakers who have made the time to be here with us and to give us their input. Very interesting insights into developments in Portugal, but also yesterday on the European level. We were very happy to have very insightful speakers for this meeting. Thank you very much. It was a great honor to host this meeting and to bring you all together. As I said, we are going to do this again in other countries. And I hope that you have taken away as many interesting ideas and proposals as I have, and that you can share them among your colleagues and peers, and that you can further develop them. We would also invite you to keep in touch and to keep connecting and to keep exchanging. It's only when people talk to each other that great ideas come up and that they can be developed further. Thank you very much. I know we have gone quite a bit over time. Thank you anyway for staying with us. A big group has made it till the end. So thank you very much for doing that, and hope to see you next time in France at the Lifelong Learning Lab, but certainly also for other events of the Lifelong Learning platform. Please stay tuned. We regularly post them on our social media. You also find them on our website. There will be a Lifelong Learning Week at the end of the year, as always, and other webinars and events that you might be interested in. So thank you very much to all of you. Thank you also to the interpreters that have made this possible, to have it in Portuguese and in English. Thank you. A big applause. That was a very, very strenuous morning, I'm sure, for both of you. Thank you very much for doing this for us. And thank you for everyone for being with us. See you again.